Alright there guys, today I'm just going to have a ramble to you about all my equipment. So getting started in the hobby, it's pretty overwhelming really. It's very difficult to kind of juggle through and sift through everything that you should get, what's necessary, what isn't necessary. And so this is just going to be an absolute ramble about what I use, why I use it, and you might completely disagree, and that's absolutely fine. Equipment is actually a fairly personal thing, especially when it comes to paper, which I plan on doing a video about in more depth at another time. It's quite divisive, which is funny, isn't it? Because it's just paper, right? Same with inks. Paints, pencils, basically any equipment. So I'm just going to go through what I use and why I use it. So to start off with, I don't usually use a sketch pad. I just have A4 printer paper. The reason being is that I just have a ton of it, and so I've just always tried to use it in that sense. I've always wanted to just get rid of it, right? So I will do my sketching and stuff like that on there. I do have a little sketchbook, a small sketchbook for ideas and just things where I'm just wanting to be a bit loose and stuff like that, but then that'll usually get translated into something like this, or just straight onto tracing paper depending on how usable it is. But to start with, I'll just sketch on paper. It's all you need, to get going. You don't need fancy paper to draw on. Then obviously you also need tracing paper. Now, again, you don't have to have tracing paper. I know some painters who will just draw their design essentially straight onto their watercolour paper, and that's fine. That's how you like it. That's not how I do it. I usually do a preliminary sketch, several preliminary sketches really, then I'll trace it onto tracing paper. It'll still be a little bit jank, and then it'll only obviously get kind of put into a concrete form when it's put into watercolour paper. So here's a nice bit of watercolour paper. I think this is Canson's. So then that's how we'll do that. And I'll go through more equipment in a minute, but this is just kind of how we do it. Another very, very important piece to use that you need, usually, is a light board. Now a light board, if I can show you, it might mess up the picture a little bit, but all that's going to do is it's going to shine through, allowing us to line that up nice and proper, like that. Magic. I spent far too long not realising that tattooers and painters didn't use a light board. I thought they just winged it and put everything on kind of straight, and yeah, some people do that. I don't. So I usually use a light board. You can use a window as well, that's perfectly fine, and doable, but drawing vertically, it's quite difficult really. So yeah. Another thing, light boards you can pick up pretty cheap off Amazon. I'd always suggest reinforcing the socket with a bit of tape or something, because this bends a hell of a lot, especially depending on where you actually put it. Where your cable is. Sorry, I'm trying to get it to focus and it's not liking me. So yeah, it bends like that, so you've kind of got to reinforce it because it's very flimsy. But this one's lasted me probably 3 years, I think. The ones before that haven't lasted me very long at all, and ideally the bigger the better. If you've got space for it, it'll make your life so much easier. Yeah, that is pretty much it for the very, very basics, right? So I say the very, very basics when obviously in actuality what you do need is pencils. Now, you can use any pencil, it doesn't really matter. I used to use these HBs, perfect, lovely. Staedtler, I love Staedtler stationery, super nice. Draw, happy as Larry. I have recently, probably for about a year, maybe 18 months, so not really very recently at all, I've started using these 6Bs, I think they're 6Bs, which are again, here they are, from Staedtler. I just find that because they naturally have like a nice fatter line, they just, I don't know, there's just something about them that I prefer. So personally, I'll use a 6B, but anything works. It's just a pencil at the end of the day. You can get cheap shit ones from the pound shop, it doesn't matter. Like I said, I like Staedtler, I like the quality that they bring. Obviously, you need a rubber, you need a sharpener, and that's really it. Another point of contention between flash painters, no real contention because a lot of flash painters don't have beef, do they? Is the marker that you will use. So, to get it onto tracing paper, you will usually use one of three. These are kind of standard. There are exceptions, again, to the rule, as there always is, but these are the three main ones. So, you got Sharpies. You can also use these to line on the watercolour paper as well. You got Sharpies, which, in my opinion, don't retain their shape very well, so I don't like to use them for anything other than blacking things out. You've got these Staedtler pigment liners, which are, this one's a 1.2, which is the biggest one you can get, I think. Super nice line, super kind of standard line, if that makes any kind of sense. Just a really nice mixture of not too fat, not too thin, and you can break those in quite nicely. Now the only problem with these is that they line in dark grey, so when it comes to lining on watercolour paper, if you're using quite a thick ink, like an acrylic ink or something like that, you will see it. You will see the ink over the top and it makes it look a little bit sloppy. Other than that, they're great. And then this one, which is everybody's favourite, the Super Ink marker. Again, takes a while to break. Well, it doesn't really take a while to break these in, but you know, you can break these in quite nicely. They don't last a huge amount of time, especially on something like cold press, but they are, in my opinion, second to none. The other option that you have is a nib. So you have a dip pen. Now you wouldn't use this on tracing paper. I'm kind of skipping ahead here because, like I said, I'm just rambling. So you wouldn't use this on tracing paper. You'd use this on the finished product on a bit of watercolour. But yeah, nibs come in a variety of sizes. If I nib, I like the B4. Is it the B4? What is that? It is the B4. Yeah. So this is the B4. It's a little bit fatter than the B5, obviously. Yeah, I just prefer a fatter line. Good practice for tattooing as well. I do sometimes nib, not often. I haven't done it in ages at the moment. But yeah, but ignore that because all we wanted to do is put a line on here. This would have been lined with a Super Ink marker. It's got a nice little bit of line weight on there. Yeah, and then that's when you translate that onto your watercolour paper. The different ones will act differently with different watercolour papers as well. So yeah, when it comes to lining on paper, these different markers, or the nib, will act differently on different types, different qualities. Sometimes the Sharpie bleeds far too much, sometimes the Super Ink marker bleeds far too much on certain quality ones. In general, the nib is a lot more, what's the word that I'm looking for, kind of predictable. It will act the same on basically every kind of paper that I've ever used. Acts the same with nib. Like I said, these two don't, and this one does as well. It's pretty good. However, on hot press and stuff, it makes it look even lighter because you haven't got that kind of contrast. It can look, especially on very cheap hot press, it can look very, very grey as opposed to the black that you want. So you might want to go over that a second time, which isn't a problem, but it's a faff. Yeah. So once we actually have as lines ready, I imagine this is just lines, then obviously we move on to the painting aspect. Brushes are not as important as you'd think. I've been using the same Amazon brushes that I got for 12 quid for about 4 years. That's not entirely true actually. I've been slowly working my way through them because you can get a pack of them, you see. But in general, you want a bigger, fatter brush for the shading aspect, and then you want a smaller one for the actual holding the ink and everything else. These ones, this one's a Prolean Plus, something like that. ProArt Prolean Plus. Probably won't be able to see it on my phone because it's crap. Yeah, it's a 7, whatever that means. I use this for smaller bits, and I use a rounder brush for bigger bits, surprise surprise. But for spit shading I'll use this kind of fat boy here, just to make it work really nice. What they're watercolour brushes. I honestly don't know much about brushes, so don't take what I say with it. No, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I just use what works for me, and I've just gotten used to them. You can see that brown one especially is a little bit bent. I need a new one, and I'll get a new one at some point. So brushes, like I said, aren't a huge deal. Just get some watercolour brushes. Ideally go into a shop and get them, and then you can kind of see what size they are, and you know roughly what you're working with, if that makes sense. For inks, for the black, you've got a few options. Some people will Sharpie or nib all the black and then shade it out with pencil. Some people will do the same, but then shade the black out with actual black ink, so spit shade the black out. And some will just use pencil. I use kind of a combination of all these different things, but if I'm using the ink, I will always use Winsor & Newton Black Indian ink, and it's the guy with the one with the spider guy on it. If that's going to focus, probably not. I don't even know where my camera is. There it is, look at that. So, Black Indian ink. You can get that in big pots, that will last you fucking ages. Absolutely forever. This is pretty much the best black on the market. I've never heard of someone having a problem with it, if I'm honest. So, stick with what you know. I've always used that one. It's a good kind of segue into colour, because the Winsor & Newton colours are absolutely dog shit. Do not use them under any circumstances because they are horrific. For flash painting, I'm talking about. This is what I am talking about, obviously. So Winsor & Newton Black Indian. Don't get the one with the dragon on the front. I think that is just black ink. I think it's called. It's not the same. It acts differently. Other inks that I use. So for here you can see some of the colour. Again, the light isn't exactly great, but it is what it is. We've got the Ecolines, because I really like Ecolines. So this is the Ecoline Green, Fur Green, 654. That's what this green is. Here is blue pencil. I'll go into pencils in a minute, colouring pencils. But the inks that I mostly use are Ecolines. I do use a couple of Magic Colour. These are watertight, so these will not leak when, or will not bleed when water's added to them, whereas these will. Ecolines are not watertight. So anytime if I had added water onto this, all this green and red would blur like fucking, it'd be a mess. Another one I like to use that I think are underrated are PH Martin's Hydruses. The Carmine especially is a lovely colour, as well as the PH Martin Radiant Scarlet. Now this is the deepest red. It's like this but on steroids. This is way better. I've just bought this and I'm trying to get my way through it. But just add a second coat and usually you're fine. So another thing to notice, surprise surprise, that inks will act differently on different papers. This is some cheap cold press called Canson's, I think it is anyway from what I can tell. The ink acts a little bit differently. You can see here where it's kind of, I haven't done quite a good enough job of spit shade, well not spit shading, just shading it and blending it in general. There's left a little waterline. You wouldn't usually get that in a better quality paper if I was using the same technique. I've just left it a little bit too long. I will go through the process and stuff at some point in the future as well. But like I said, we're just sticking to the equipment side for now. So different inks will act differently. Other good brands, like I said, Magicolor, I've only recently started using a couple of them. This yellow I really like because it's really close, really similar to the tattoo ink. But the yellow that I used to use before that was Hansa Yellow Medium, the Hydrus, which is also very, very good and very, very nice. And nice and thick, so these are like liquid acrylics. They're very, very thick. The thicker to work with, the nicer, the leave everything more saturated. Whereas these, in general, are a hell of a lot thinner. They do have really good saturation, but you've really got to load your brush up, and it's better on certain types of paper. These ones are better on lower quality papers because the saturation's so good, whereas these will look a bit crap on lower quality papers. We'll go on to paper in a minute as well. Yeah, So they're the inks that I use: Ecoline, Hydruses, PH Martin's Radiant, Magicolor. You can get several others, Waverleys. There's loads of ones out there, but these are the ones that I use and I recommend. When it comes to pencils, I used to just use these ones that I've literally had for decades, called Crayola Pros, which were really good. But once they started running out, I moved on to Prismacolor. Is it Prismacolor? Polychromos, sorry. The Faber-Castell Polychromos. These are great. Main colours that I use are this middle phthalo blue. So this blue is the one that I use for most things. If you see blue on my paintings, that's usually what it is. Although again, on lower quality papers, you can see here where it doesn't look as saturated as it could do, whereas on nicer quality papers it does look much better. This is the black that I use. It's Stabilo Trio. It's just a big black pencil. They're cheap. You can get some really nice blends with them. Obviously you don't blend, but you know what I mean, as you were making that black blend, and it's cheaper than China markers, so they're good. Yeah, I mean, I don't use a massive amount of the rest of these colours, it's just as and when. This is a cobalt green. This purple I do use, but the Magicolor purple is really nice when it's diluted. This one is purple violet, so that's a really nice one as well. Wow, I bet there's a lot of erms in this. Yeah, that is essentially everything colour-wise that we use for the act of painting. Other bits of equipment that you'll need: a little painting palette. Oh, this is nice. I wonder who made this one. Oh, cool. It was me. So I made these weird little paint tins years ago. They need... I might do some more at some point. They're quite good. You just need to absolutely load them up with hot glue, because I didn't do a great job last time. Just need a little palette, or just get a cheap one from the works, it doesn't matter. These are great because obviously they've got ink caps in, and I only need to put a few drops in and it all collects. Needs a good wash, especially for the acrylics, because they do build up, but the rest of them are fine really. Or bottle caps. Bottle caps are also great if you want to be extra cheap, or, you know, reuse things. These are great. You also need a little pot of water. I've just got this little old tiny jam jar, or just a cup of water, whatever you want, doesn't matter. And some kitchen roll as well. Again, there's several ways that people spit shade. That's how I do it. Other people will use these. You can't really tell because this one's black, but these water brushes, and it's exactly what it sounds like really. You fill this compartment with water, and then when you blend in, you will blend out with this. I don't like using them. I hate it because the blend's too big, and I like to have nice tight blends. So it's good for skin, but not really for much else. When it comes to paper, stuff that I'm using, I'm very lucky in that I used a lot of different papers, a lot of different types of paper. I say that there's not really that many types of paper, but for watercolour paper, I mean, you can probably tell, you should hopefully be able to tell on this video. You've got cold press, hot press. They're the two main types. Hot press in general is a lot smoother. It doesn't allow you to work with colour quite as long, or inks quite as long. It's nicer to line on because of the smoothness. Yeah, cold press is a lot rougher. You can go through markers very badly, very quickly with them because of how rough it is. This isn't even a rough one. But it is, personally, you get, I much prefer it. You can do a lot more with it. It gives you a lot more time to work with colour, and we're not even focusing on anything. Is that better? Is this better? There we go, sorry about that. It gives you a lot more time to work with colour, which is great. Excuse me. But yeah, then there's loads of different brands. I use Canson's mostly, which is super cheap. If you're wanting to try something out and you know, don't want to spend the thing, it's like 15 quid for 30 sheets. It's great. This is Saunders Waterford. This is the only decent hot press in my opinion, because it acts like a cold press paper but it's smooth. These are very expensive. You're looking at, for a pad of paper, you're looking at probably 30-40 quid, which will only have, I think, 12 sheets in it. You can get them way cheaper if you just buy big sheets and cut them down yourself though. But yeah, that's it for paper really. That's the basics for paper, and it's very much personal preference. If people like what they like, I said, I don't like hot press in general, other than the Saunders Waterford. Cold press is way better for a lot of things, in my opinion. I'm sure I'll start some fights over at Instagram with something like that. Yeah, oh yeah, the other main thing, huge main thing, that we kind of forgot to mention as well, is reference. So, get yourself a good reference book. You can get these Sailor Jerry's ones from Amazon again. You can get kind of anything that you're interested in. You can look on Instagram, but tracing's quite handy. So getting yourself a really good reference book that has a ton of tattoo designs, tattooable designs as well. You know that these designs are tattooable, because there's probably a discussion to be had there in the future about actually having tattooable designs. But yeah, you've got loads of really cool stuff in there. And that is really it. There's odd little things that you can need if you want to spice things up a little bit by using tape, masking tape, the borders for argument's sake, to then stain things. And again, you can make your own stain. I mean, I say make your own stain. All it really is some stinky old coffee, cheap coffee from Aldi, that I keep in a sealed tub. That's pretty good. Or you can dilute some ink. The pH minus hydrous is quite good for that, where you can just dilute some ink with some distilled water, and that makes it a little bit smoother too. Or you can use black tape for borders as well. Cut that into smaller strips, and just do that for a border. There's plenty of other things that you can do, but that is the majority. Every single painting that I'll do, that is basically what I use. So I hope that's been vaguely helpful. I know that it's probably been a complete ramble entirely, because this was not scripted. I do have some plans for some other videos coming up, some of the spooky ones, because people have been very interested in those, which is great. So several coming up. They just take me a while to make. I need to write them. I need to write like a script for them and stuff like that, and the editing's a little bit different, and things like that, whereas something like this is a little bit more off the cuff, although it's probably not quite that great for you guys, because it's probably boring as shit. But anyway, thanks very much for watching. I very much appreciate you. Look after yourselves.